Are you living with fear, or are you living in fear? What is it, and how do we define it? We all have fears. It could be a fear of failure. It could be a fear linked to a life situation, education, the future. It could even be FOMO, a fear of missing out. The list is absolutely endless. But don't be fooled by fear. It stands for false evidence appearing real. Now, I want you to think about what fear means to you. What does it look like in your world, and what does it feel like for you? Okay? In a moment, a couple of situations and scenarios are going to appear on screen. And I want you to think about the level of fear you might have if you suddenly found yourself in that situation. Now, you've got some cards on your chairs. If you feel like you would have a particularly high level of fear in that situation, I want you to hold up that green card. If you feel that you would have a medium level of fear, where you might be a little bit scared sometimes, but not all the time, I want you to hold up that orange card. And if you feel like, no, I've got this, no level of fear for me, I want you to hold up that blue card. Okay? The first one is jumping out of a plane. Now, I might add at this point that you would have a parachute attached. Clearly, jumping out of a plane without a parachute might be a little bit more scary. So, doing a parachute jump out of a plane, how does that make you feel? Hold those cards up nice and high. Is it green? Is it orange? Or is it blue? Hold them up. Lovely. The next one then is linked to education. What fears do you have around education? With specific reference to your ability to achieve and be successful in education. Do you have some fears around that? Hold those cards up again nice and high. So green, orange, or blue. The reason I've done that task is to show you that fear is experienced very differently for everyone. It looks, it feels, it sounds very different depending on who you are. Now, fear often manifests itself as an emotion, and we use fear as a safety mechanism. The key consideration here is the words might happen. When you think about fear, if you were to look the word fear up in the dictionary, you would find the definition is an unpleasant emotion or thought we have when we're frightened or we're worried about something bad that is happening or might happen. So I want you to think about the word might happen. And when you do that, I also want you to think about the alternative. And of course, the alternative is might not. Similarly, to the start of this talk, when I asked you to think about what fear means to you, I want you to think about a situation that you might have found yourself in, and you turned it down. And you turned that situation down because you doubted yourself, you were worried about failing. And the next time you find yourself in that situation, I want you to think about the alternative. The alternative is might not. I want you to think about the potential of a positive outcome. Now, I want to explore false evidence appearing real. And it's a theme I'm going to explore throughout this talk, and I'll come back to it later. The reality is, we often find ourselves in situations that scare us and that frighten us. And we look for false evidence as a way to justify ourselves not taking that opportunity up. I've got a couple of examples for you. One might be that you applied for a job a long time ago. And on that particular occasion, you weren't successful and you didn't get to the interview stage. Now, some time has passed and you see another job that's not too dissimilar. It's not the same job, but it's not too dissimilar. Now, you want to go for that job, but you convince yourself that you shouldn't go for it. And you start to think about the reasons why not. And some of them are that you went for a job that's not too dissimilar, you didn't get taken to the interview stage, so I'm not going to go for this job. And you convince yourself not to go for it. Another example might be that you got asked to lead a project, for example. It could be at school, it could be at college. And somebody a long time ago, this person is no longer significant in your life, told you that you don't have the skills to do that. Now, this opportunity is very exciting for you, but you start remembering that conversation you had a long time ago. You start to believe that you no longer have the skills to do that, to take up and lead that project. And this is what I'm referring to as false evidence. There is no evidence there to suggest that you can't do that and you can't be successful and you can't achieve. But in our heads, we suddenly start to compute That evidence is fact and it's real. So, the next time you find yourself in a situation like that, I want you to ask yourself the following questions. What happens if might happen doesn't happen? What happens if the worst case scenario doesn't happen? What happens if I achieve this? What would it feel like if I achieved this? What would life be like if I went for this, whatever this may be, and achieved it, whatever it may be? Now, the reason I've opened up with the definition of fear is that we often find ourselves in real-life situations where this applies. And on a very personal level, this is very relevant and has been applied to lots of situations in my life, whether that be in my early years growing up and in a number of situations since. Now, what you won't know about me is that I was born into significant disadvantage and poverty. I grew up in Ireland, and I lived on the Aran Islands on a very small island there called Inishmore, which is approximately 8 kilometres long and 2 kilometres wide. And it's just off the coast of Galway. Now, the place was so small, in fact, that, believe it or not, it didn't even have its own hospital. We had to make a trip across the water to Galway, to the local hospital where I was born. Now, I didn't live on the Aran Islands for very long because my father wasn't a particularly nice person. And he was very violent towards me and my family. So I was exposed to this whole notion of fear from a very early stage in my life. Now, I found myself in lots and lots of situations throughout my life, situations where I feel uncomfortable, where I've been exposed to danger, where I've been scared, and I've had lots and lots of high levels of fear. If I was to give you a whistle-stop journey of my life from that point until now, it would read as follows. So I fled from the Aran Islands when I was very young due to domestic violence, and I lived in lots and lots of areas, lots of different places in Ireland, and a lot of those were hostels. Predominantly hostels, but at times, unfortunately, I found myself homeless. I had many, many missed opportunities in education because I moved around so much. And believe it or not, I had virtually no primary school attendance. Now, domestic violence is something I was exposed to for many years when I was younger. And I moved to England when I was 9 years old. That was a challenge. Of course it was, because I was struggling with lots and lots of aspects of life. Having to move from Ireland to England was very difficult. I also sounded very different to every other child in primary school. I had an Irish accent. Nobody could understand a word I was saying. And for me, it highlighted the fact that I was different. Now, having been in England for less than 2 years, I was subsequently taken into foster care. I was struggling with education. I was falling significantly behind my peers academically. I was becoming really demotivated with this whole notion of education. Being in foster care wasn't easy, and that further highlighted the fact that I was different. I was still struggling at school. I was still falling behind my peers, but I was now struggling with dyslexia. And for the most part, that went undiagnosed for most of my education. Now, this may be of no surprise to you, but I got in a lot of bother at school. Of course I did. Given what I'd seen, what I'd been exposed to, I was acting out in a way to mask my own insecurities and my fear I had around education. I was inhibiting myself from achieving, and most of that was down to me and my mindset at the time. I had a very fixed mindset, a very negative mindset. I had a fear of failure, and I didn't particularly enjoy being in situations that were out of my control. So, what can I tell you from here, ladies and gents? Relax, take a breath. There's hope, the story gets better. Like me, if you're struggling with any of these aspects, there is opportunity to change the trajectory of your life. Where we start in life is absolutely not where we need to end up. Yes, it's true, to a certain degree, we are a product of our environment. But we all have the opportunity to change that outlook. I started to realise my potential through sport and athletics, where I excelled as a teenager. Having got in a small spot of trouble with the police, I and the people around me realised I had the ability to run. Make of that what you will. Having outrun a police car from the local shopping centre to my foster home, which is about 3.5 miles long, it was clear I had some talent It just needed nurturing. And with the support from a foster family, parents, and my PE teacher, I joined a local athletics club. Now, that particular situation wasn't comfortable. It didn't sit particularly well with me, and I absolutely had my own fears around that. But I continued to turn up every Tuesday and Thursday. And I soon benefited from significant improvements. I was no longer there as a passenger. I soon became a real driving force in the club, and somebody who became recognised as one of the best members of the club across all ages. I was soon chasing down club records. I was not only just competing with other Leeds athletes, but I was competing across the Yorkshire County with great success. So, what do you think would have happened to little old Sean Dirrane back then if I'd have allowed that uncomfortableness, that feeling of fear, that worry, to dictate whether I continue with athletics or not? What do you think would have happened if I just didn't turn up after that first session? From here, I slowly began to overcome that uncomfortableness and that worry and fear that I shouldn't be there. And I made a real commitment to athletics. And on reflection, I had never wholeheartedly, 100% committed to anything at that point in my life. And I realised that success or failure aside, this is something I am going to commit to. Because if you never truly commit to anything, 100%, how will you ever know how good you can be? Over a period of years, I showed lots and lots of determination, commitment, and perseverance. And yes, it was challenging, but I achieved some fantastic things in athletics. My most notable achievements were that I was the fastest UK under-23 athlete to run 1,500 metres indoors during 2007. I got selected to run for Great Britain at the European Championships as an under-23 athlete. I made the front cover of Athletics Weekly, which is a running magazine. Now, having grown up with a fear of failure and not always believing in my ability to achieve in my education, I've since gone on to study a degree in sports and exercise science, a master's in sport and exercise nutrition. And I started my working career in 2008. And that career I developed into a consultancy role where I was working with a number of independent fostering agencies. And in that role, I became one of the youngest foster panel chairs in the entire country. I developed that consultancy role into a business in 2017. That's no longer wholeheartedly reliant on me. So I've recruited and have employed a number of staff since. And as an organisation, we specialise in working in the education sector. I also own an additional business, which is an investment business. That is a portfolio of buy-to-let properties. And I started investing in that business at the age of 23, and I continue to do that now. So, having bragged a little bit about some of my accolades, I think it's important to say that I didn't win everything. I certainly didn't achieve the first time, every time. And I certainly didn't win every race that I set out to run. But I learned some key lessons, some valuable lessons from those races that I didn't win. Doing something, despite the fear of failure, is the most powerful thing you can do. Don't miss opportunities because you think you might fail. You might not fail. You might win. You might achieve. And more importantly, you'll absolutely learn some lessons along the way. An example I can give you, one of many, is when I ran the Yorkshire 800 metre championships many years ago. I wasn't really expected to win, and I finished third on that particular occasion. I didn't let the fear of failure dictate how I ran that race. I took that race to every other athlete on the start line. I front ran it from gun almost to tape, where I was pipped to the line by the first and second athletes. But I learned some valuable lessons from that race. Through sport, I found the confidence and the ability to conquer my fear. I learned some valuable lessons through sport that I use not only in sport, but in education and in my career today. What you need to realise is that if you want to achieve anything in life, there's always going to be a level of fear. And there's always going to be a desire to avoid failure. But if you understand that, you can use it to drive you forward and help you to achieve your goals. I think I learned to unlock my potential many years ago because I realised that I had a fear of failure, and that fear of failure was holding me back. And I think a lot of people don't realise how capable they are what they can achieve, and it often takes you to step outside your comfort zone, to just give something a go before you're going to realize it. The fear of failure is absolutely debilitating. But what's the worst thing that can happen? Now, a couple of key take-home messages from me before I close this talk I want you to remember is don't let the fear of failure hold you back. Remember, it stands for false evidence appearing real. Giving something a go, despite the fear of failure, is the most powerful thing you can do. Don't miss opportunities because you think you're going to fail. Learn to say yes, give it a go, and I think you'll be surprised at what you can achieve. Thank you very much.